So, you want to move to Canada as a permanent resident? In this video, I'll discuss the steps you need to follow to ensure that you are successful in the process. So this includes preliminary questions to consider before you apply, how the process works, assessments that you need to do when you're ready to apply, submitting your application to get an invitation, which is the ITA, gathering your documents, submitting the PR application, and the waiting period to getting approved for the PR. So this video is for anyone who wants to apply on their own without a lawyer. It can't be done. I did it on my own and I have helped others move as well. If this applies to you, stay tuned. In order to be eligible for this program, you need to have at least a bachelor's degree, pass a language test, and have at least 1 year work experience in a skilled role. That's just the bare minimum to be considered. It doesn't guarantee eligibility. So whenever people reach out to ask about my experience moving to Canada, I always begin by asking them the following preliminary questions, which I believe are very important before they consider applying in the first place. First is, are you between the ages of 20 to 29? Do you have a master's degree or higher? Do you have at least 2 years of skilled work experience? Can you raise $10,000 US, which is approximately 13,000 Canadian dollars, as proof of funds? The most successful candidates answer yes to all these questions. If you don't have these, it doesn't mean that you cannot be successful. It just means that you would have to supplement your application in other areas. This doesn't apply to question 4 though. The reason these questions are important to consider is because it contributes to the major reasons people get rejected or end up wasting energy and money. So why begin a process when you're not entirely sure how it works? Before diving into the steps, here's a summary of how the express entry process works. It's a points-based system seeking to attract skilled workers to Canada, and you need to gain a number of points to qualify for the program. You can gain points in the different categories. There's age, years of experience, degree, language exam results, work experience in Canada, etc. You can only get a maximum number of points per section. So say for example, you have 2 years work experience, the maximum point you can get in that category is 13. If you have 3 or more years of experience, the maximum number of points you can get is 25. So it doesn't matter if you have 10 or 15 years experience, you will still get the same number of points in that category as someone with 3 years experience. Do you understand the logic now? After calculating your points, you then submit an application to receive an ITA, which is an invitation to apply for permanent residency. Submitting this application puts you in the applicant pool to be considered. So every 2 to 3 times a month, a draw is made, and individuals that have submitted an application are invited to apply for permanent residence. What that means is if your score is, say, 560, for example, and the cutoff number selected in the draw is 550 for that month, it means that every individual that scores 550 and above is eligible to apply for permanent residence. If you score below that, you stay in the pool until the next draw. The points fluctuate monthly, but it tends to go higher, not lower. But sometimes you might get lucky. Once you get your ITA, you are then required to submit all supporting documents. So if you've stated in your original application that you have a master's degree, for example, or if you stated that you have 4 years experience, you need to show proof of each. Guidance is provided on the CIC website on how to gather this documentation and what is considered suitable. You have 2 months to gather and submit these documents. Trust me, it's not a lot of time. Which is why I would recommend the preliminary steps of confirming your eligibility before you begin. So say for example, you need to consider if you need to gain more years of experience or retake the English exam to improve your score before applying, or just give yourself more time to save up on the proof of funds that's required. During this time, you also want to identify your NOC code. This involves going through a directory on the CIC website to determine which job description and code closely matches the one you'll be stating as your experience on your application. However, it doesn't have to be the exact job title, only the description matters. It's important that the role you select is full-time or part-time equivalent in one role, not multiple. So you can't, for example, combine your experience as a business analyst with that as a lab technician. You have to pick only one. And I would recommend picking the one that you have the most experience in. So once your documents are in order, you can then submit your PR application. Now the waiting period begins. According to the CIC, the process can last up to 6 months, but in some cases it can go up to a year to be approved. My process took 1.5 months, and I know people who have had to wait 7 months. It varies per person, and you can't particularly say what could be the reason. Some things might be outside of your control, but the more organized and thorough you are in preparing your documentation, basically make their lives easier, the better your chances are at success. So that's how the express entry process works. To recap, here's where we are on the timeline. You know you are eligible for the program. Now you are putting things in order before submitting your first application. So these steps involve registering to take the language exam, and 2, getting your credentials assessed and converted to the Canadian equivalent. These 2 steps need to be completed way before you submit your application, since you need to enter in your exam score in your initial application. So depending on your location and the time of the year, let's say Christmas, you may have difficulty getting an exam date. So it's important to factor this in your plan and book a date in advance. The higher your score, the more CRS points you get. A competitive IELTS score is scoring at least an 8 in all 4 sections. So that's the listening, speaking, reading, and writing. This exam is required of every applicant irrespective of citizenship. I had a bachelor's and a master's from the US, and I still had to sit for the exam. I know. After receiving your test results, you can calculate the points that you will get on this website. Check the link right here. This is so you have an idea of what your CRS score would be before submitting an application. Once that is done, check out the CIC website to see the list of eligible bodies that you can get your education credentials assessed. I recommend WES. It's the fastest, and you can get your results in less than 2 months. I used ICAS when I applied, and it took 5 months to get my assessment sent back to me. Your academic institution will be required to send your official transcripts to your chosen governing body, so you need to factor in the time that it will take to get them to respond to your inquiry as well. If you have a master's degree or PhD, you don't have to send your bachelor's degree also to WES, since it's implied that that's the minimum requirement to get into graduate school in the first place. So I would recommend doing this only if you're having difficulty getting your school to send your undergraduate degree to WES. It doesn't cost you extra to get both degrees assessed at the same time anyway, so you could do that if you wanted to. After that is done, you've received your education assessment and passed the language test, you can then submit your application. The application form is online on the CIC website, and now that puts you in the applicant pool. When the next draw takes place, and if your points are higher than the cutoff, you receive an ITA, which is the invitation to apply for PR. Then your 2 months countdown begins to submit all your documents and upload it to the portal. In some extreme cases, if you need an extension, you can contact CIC through the portal to request one. However, I would recommend preparing and gathering your documents in advance to prevent any issues. So here are the documents that you need to gather. A language test results. You should already have this prior to submitting your application in the first place. Educational Credential Assessment, ECA. Same thing, you should already have this prior to submitting your application. Proof of funds. So individual applicants would need to have 10,000 USD, about 13,000 Canadian dollars, and with a spouse, you would need 16,000 Canadian dollars. The number increases with an addition of dependents. This is a big one because a lot of people assume they can just borrow money and put it forward. Your application will likely get rejected if you go this route. And that's because the Canadian government doesn't want you taking on debt to move to Canada, since you need that money to survive in the first place. You don't want someone calling you when you're there, asking you to pay back your debt while you're still trying to settle in a new country. So, how do you go about doing this? Give yourself time to save up as much as possible and seek support from your family and friends when required. The only condition for getting support from family and friends is that the money that is being put forward has to be a gift, not a loan. You can write a supporting letter to accompany your application and explain this fact. One thing to keep in mind is that you would have to show a 6 months bank statement, so it can be a lump sum wired into your account. That would be a red flag. So use your discretion in determining the best strategy to raise this money well in advance before you even begin your application. If you happen to get a job offer in Canada, you automatically bypass this entire process, since the job will support you financially. but the reality is that it's much harder to get a job or sponsorship from outside Canada. The next document you need is a police report. You need to get a police report from every country that you and your family member that you're bringing along with you has lived in for at least 6 months. This only goes as far back as the last 10 years. The police report can take longer than anticipated, so my advice is that you put in this request in advance. When I applied, I had to get a police report from Nigeria, the UK, and the US. The others took less than 2 weeks to arrive, but surprisingly, the FBI said they needed 3 months to process my report because they were backlogged. So back in 2018, I had 3 months to submit my documents, and the FBI was just transitioning to a digital system for processing their application. I realized this after waiting 2 months and calling the FBI frequently to check on the status of my application. So basically, in summary, you can now receive your police report from the FBI in less than 48 hours after mailing your fingerprints to them. See more in the links below. Everything that I've talked about, the links will all be in the description box below, so you can always check that out. The next document you need is to get letters from all your previous and current employers. This can take time, so it's important to contact all your employers in advance. They'll need to write you a letter that summarizes your role, how many years you worked in that role, hours worked, annual salary, and this is all printed on the company letterhead. More details in the link below. Depending on your relationship with your employer, I'd recommend printing or emailing the job description or your chosen NOC code to them, so they can use that as a guide in accurately representing you. Employers are likely to be very busy with their day jobs, so this will definitely cut into your 2-month countdown. So plan for this also in advance. You also need a medical report. So you need to get a medical assessment done. The list of doctors in your region that have been selected will be available on the CIC website. And you'll have to pay out of pocket for this, regardless of insurance, because these doctors are working for the Canadian government. The medical exam is basically looking to see if you have any condition that could be financially taxing on the Canadian healthcare system, since they have a universal healthcare system. That's what applies here. Biometrics. This wasn't required when I applied, but apparently it's now a requirement for new applicants. Details on how to do this will be on the CIC website. Other miscellaneous documents to submit include a passport photograph, a copy of your passport, proof of Canadian siblings, etc. All of what we just discussed is the difficult part. Once that is all gathered and submitted on the website, the waiting period begins. So from time to time, the CIC will reach out to you, send you a message if there's any missing or incomplete information, or if they need more evidence from you on anything. This process can last up to 6 months or more in some cases. The email you're basically waiting on is the one that tells you to send your passport to Ottawa for stamping, if you live in the US, or to your nearest visa office. During the waiting period, there are a number of sites you can check out to follow along on the journey of others in the same boat and kind of gauge where your application is based on the date of submission of others. Links will be here as well. You should also monitor your portal from time to time to determine where you are in the process. So that's it, folks. Express Entry explained. Let me know if you have more questions. You can put them in the comments below and reach out to me. I hope this has been helpful, and I wish you all the best with the process.